The highway out of town had already given up its last cup of light when Travis drove the truck into a hush that felt older than the road itself. Pines leaned like listening things. The world narrowed to the hum of the engine, the scrape of gravel, and the faraway conversation of other men wrapped in the same work-worn jackets. Night draped soft and deep, a velvet the shape of inhaled smoke, and the sky hung low with stars that trembled like distant ship lights. This is not a story that begins with a shout. It begins with a breath, with a man who learned the rhythm of wood and chain and the rough mathematics of trees, with the close, practical jokes of crewmen who were brothers by habit and habit alone, with a road that remembered every boot print. It begins with ordinary hands and ordinary laughter that slid away when the first impossible light rolled out of the dark like something curious and heavy. Listen, you can picture it any way you want. A bright coin, a mirror, a moon folded wrong. For my telling, the light came like a memory and like a question. It pressed the air into a different temperature. The truck radio faltered and then fell asleep. The joke stopped in the open like a door left ajar. Even the dogs in the nearest yards blinked as if someone had poked at the sky. Travis was the type of man who counted seconds by the way a cigarette burned, who measured distance in straight lines and in what could be seen from the hood of a truck. He felt a prickle of something at the base of his skull. Not fear exactly, but the intimate awareness that the world had tilted a fraction. He stepped out because that was what he did when the road gave him a new corner to inspect. He stepped toward the thing that was not yet explained. Close now your eyes for a moment and let the night breathe in around you. Hear the gum bark whisper, the creak of rigging, the small and private sounds of men moving like constellations. We'll slow the words down as though we are letting sand run through fingers. This story is for those late hours, for lungs that have room left for wonder and for a sleepy kind of dread that makes the jaw unclench. There are two ways a night like this can end, with a story told over coffee, with the clatter of mugs and the world returned to its usual logic, or with a silence so wide it unhooks the melody of time. Tonight took the second path. The clearing opened like a stage, and the light was not a thing of the sky, but of its own accord, humming, layered, a kind of glass song. Men held their breath as if the night had asked them to stay quiet. Later they'd say the light smelled faintly of ozone and old pennies, that it felt like the inside of a bell. This is where we slow, so your voice on the microphone can grow soft and low. Imagine Travis there, a small figure in the too bright field, seeing something that made the past step back. Imagine hands raised not in prayer, but in a silent attempt to touch an answer. Imagine the light folding around thought, and then, as if someone had turned a page in a book you didn't know you were reading, a sound like a note stretched across the ribs of the world. I will not sweep ahead. Each part of this telling will be a slow, immersive room you can walk through with your ears. Each chapter will end on the lip of a cliff so the dream keeps going when you blink. Below are the 7 chapters I will craft when you ask for them, each designed to hold you, to hush you, and to pull you a little farther from the shore of the known. Asterisk the engine rattled like an old heartbeat as the crude truck wound its way down the dirt road, chewing through the darkening forest. Pines leaned close on either side, tall silhouettes stitched against the twilight sky where the last streaks of amber bled into blue. It was November 5th, 1975, and though the workday was over, the woods still held their breath, as if reluctant to release the men who had taken so much from its ribs. Inside the cab, laughter rose and fell like waves. The crew, tired and sore from hours of felling timber, passed jokes back and forth, voices warm with the easy familiarity of men who worked side by side day after day. Travis Walton sat near the passenger side, one elbow resting against the cracked window, his thoughts half drifting between exhaustion and the relief of heading home. The smell of sap and sawdust clung to his clothes, and the rhythm of the road lulled him into a trance of half-thoughts. But outside, beyond the headlights, beyond the steady growl of gears, the night was not still. The forest seemed to stretch longer than it should. The stars sharpened into points, bright and clear in the thin mountain air. And then, the sound began to change. It was subtle at first, the way a songbird falls quiet when a predator circles. The men felt it before they realized it, a hush that pushed them through the metal shell of the truck. The laughter dimmed, then died, as if words no longer had permission to be loud. Even the engine seemed smaller somehow, swallowed by something wider than the forest itself. "Do you hear that?" one of the men muttered. But there was no that to hear, not yet. Only a silence to deliberate, to heavy, as though the earth itself was waiting. Then came the glow. At first, Travis thought it was the moon caught between the trees, but the light was wrong. Too bright, too sharp, too close. It bled through the pines ahead, turning bark to silver and needles to glass. The truck rounded a bend, and there it was, suspended just above the clearing, a craft. It wasn't large, not like the flying saucers he had seen in comic books or old sci-fi magazines. This one pulsed like a molten heart, its surface shifting with a coppery sheen, as if light itself had been hammered into shape. A low hum pressed against their bones, rattling the teeth in their jaws. The truck screeched to a stop. Every man sat frozen, wide-eyed, breath held. The glow painted their faces pale, each expression caught between awe and disbelief. Travis leaned forward, eyes wide, his pulse suddenly alive with a fire he couldn't name. Something in him, reckless curiosity, or perhaps a hunger for proof, snapped free. "I'm going out there," he said. "Travis, don't," one of the crew barked, but it was too late. The door slammed, the sound ringing sharp in the eerie quiet, and Travis stepped into the clearing. The air felt charged, as if a storm had gathered without clouds. Every hair on his body lifted, tingling. The light bathed him, soft and yet impossibly fierce, wrapping him in its glow. Each step closer made the craft seem less like a machine and more like something alive. Humming with intention, watching Dot behind him, the men shouted, their voices muffled as if the air swallowed sound. "Get back in the truck, Travis. Don't go near it." But Travis didn't stop. He moved as if compelled, eyes locked on the pulsing glow. The craft shifted slightly, dipping lower, the hum deepening to a note that made his stomach tighten. For a heartbeat, the world hung still. A frozen photograph, the men in the truck, pale with terror. Travis in the open clearing, bathed in firelight, the craft humming like a bell waiting to be struck. And then a sudden blast of blue-green light shot from the underside of the object, striking Travis square in the chest. His body lifted off the ground like a ragdoll caught in an invisible hand. The crew screamed. Sparks danced in the air as Travis's limbs flailed once, twice, and then went limp. The last thing the men saw was his silhouette suspended in the glow, his body trembling like a leaf caught in a storm of light. And then nothing. The light swallowed him. The men in the truck erupted into chaos, voices crashing over one another. Fear tore through them, primal and undeniable. "Drive. Get us out of here. He's dead. Oh God, he's dead." The truck roared back to life, tires spitting gravel, fleeing the clearing as though the forest itself was chasing them. But behind them, in that quiet place where the road bent and the night broke open, Travis Walton was gone, gone into the light. The truck barreled down the forest road, gravel snapping like gunfire beneath the tires. The men inside were silent at first, every one of them locked in the grip of disbelief, their minds playing the same impossible image over and over. Travis, frozen in that unnatural glow, his body hurled upward like a leaf in the grip of some unearthly wind. Breath came shallow, ragged. A few muttered prayers slipped between clenched teeth. One man's hands shook so badly he pressed them flat against his thighs, trying to ground himself. Finally, Mike Rogers, the crew chief, broke the silence. We left him." His voice cracked under the weight of it. "God help us. We left him there." The words were true, but none of them wanted to hear them. They had abandoned Travis, their friend, their brother in labor, to whatever that thing had been. The truck rattled to a halt on the roadside miles down, dust rising like ghosts in the headlight beams. No one moved. The men just sat, breathing hard, staring at one another, the echo of what they had seen still vibrating in their skulls. One of them finally whispered, "We've got to go back." The thought chilled them all. To return meant facing that light again, that hum that wasn't a sound but a pressure in the bones. Yet the alternative, leaving Travis to whatever fate had claimed him, was worse. After a tense, shivering pause, Mike turned the truck around. Back they went. the headlights sweeping the road like a nervous heartbeat. Each bend in the dirt path seemed longer now, the trees taller. Their branches curled overhead like ribs. When at last they reached the clearing, the glow was gone. The truck idled in the middle of the road. Engine grumbling in the hushed dot where the craft had hovered, there was nothing. No fire, no hum, only darkness and the memory of a bell's echo still ringing in the men's ears. They searched, calling Travis's name into the woods. Flashing lights across the forest floor, their boots crunching over pine needles and damp earth. But the clearing had swallowed him. Not a trace remained. It was as though the forest itself had conspired to erase him. Hours later, numb and shaken, they went to the nearest town. They walked into the sheriff's office pale and wild-eyed, their words tumbling over one another as they tried to explain. The story sounded insane even as they told it. A craft, a beam of light. Travis lifted into the air and gone. The sheriff listened, his expression grim and skeptical, though in the quiet of the office he, too, felt a prickle crawl across his skin. But here's where the story begins to split. While the men scrambled to explain what had happened, while suspicion and whispers gathered in town, Travis himself was no longer of this earth. For Travis, there was no memory of falling, no memory of the beam striking his chest. One moment he was in the clearing, the next, he awoke in darkness. He blinked, but the dark was absolute, pressing in like velvet over his eyes. His chest ached, each breath dragging like sand through broken glass. Slowly, the blackness receded, replaced by a faint glow that pulsed overhead. The air smelled sharp, metallic, and unfamiliar. He tried to sit up. His body felt weak, trembling. The surface beneath him was not soil, not wood, but something smooth, cold, and unyielding. A table. Shapes began to move at the edges of the glow-dot figures. They glided closer, silent as shadows. Small, no taller than a child, with thin limbs and large, oval heads. Their skin was a waxen gray, their eyes vast and black, reflecting the dim light like pools of oil. They did not speak, but their presence pressed against Travis's mind, wordless and heavy. He scrambled back, every nerve in his body screaming. His voice tore out, hoarse and ragged, "Stay away from me." But the figures only drifted nearer, their gaze steady, unblinking. A hum filled the room. That same deep vibration he had felt in the clearing, as though the very air had been struck like a great invisible bell. The sound reverberated through his bones, dizzying him, pulling him toward unconsciousness. The figures reached out slender hands, not in violence, but in a kind of clinical purpose. Their touch was cool, deliberate. Travis fought, swinging wildly, his hands colliding with bodies that felt both fragile and unyielding, as if made of something more than flesh. Then dash light. Blinding. A flood of gold-white brilliance filled the chamber, swallowing the figures, erasing the walls. For an instant, Travis felt himself dissolve into it, his body unmoored, his thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. And just before the world blinked away again, a shape loomed out of the brilliance, not small and gray, but tall, human-like. Watching back in town, suspicion already churned. Some believed the men's tale. Others whispered darker theories, that Travis had been murdered, that the UFO was a lie to cover their guilt. Search parties formed. Reporters circled. The story grew like wildfire, stretching beyond the town into the wider world. But Travis was gone, somewhere beyond human reach, caught between the hum of the bell and the hands of beings who did not belong to Earth. Time is an anchor for the human mind. We live by its steady drip, measure it with clocks, with calendars, with the rising and falling of the sun. But in that strange place where Travis found himself, time was not so much broken as it was irrelevant. He drifted in and out of consciousness, never certain if minutes or hours had passed. Each awakening felt like surfacing from deep water, lungs burning, eyes searching for light that wasn't there. The chamber around him shifted. At times it seemed no larger than a small cabin, its walls curving in on themselves like the inside of a shell. At other times, it felt infinite, as though he were suspended in a void, surrounded by walls that receded the more he tried to focus on them. Corners did not exist here. Every edge bent smoothly into another, denying the mind the comfort of geometry. And always the hum. That deep, resonant vibration that was not heard with the ears but felt in the marrow. It made his skin crawl, his teeth ache. It was the sound of being observed. The small gray figures returned, sometimes in pairs, sometimes in threes. They glided around him without footsteps, without speech. Their enormous eyes watched, absorbing every flicker of his fear. When they touched him, it was not cruel, but detached, like physicians examining a specimen. Travis fought them whenever he could. He lashed out with fists, kicked with what little strength his body could summon. But resistance felt useless in a place where his movements were slowed, muffled, like swimming through heavy water. Still, the fight was all that reminded him he was alive, that he was more than an insect pinned to a collector's page. And yet, amidst the panic, there were moments, tiny fragments of calm, when he felt a strange pull, a whispering curiosity brushing against his thoughts, as though the beings were not only studying him, but also listening to the rhythm of his mind. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the world turned sharp and suspicious. The disappearance had turned the small Arizona town into a nest of rumor and frenzy. Newspapers called it everything from a hoax to an alien abduction. The sheriff's office faced pressure from every direction. Locals whispered murder. Journalists demanded answers. Mike Rogers and the crew were questioned again and again. Their stories pulled apart, dissected, tested for cracks. And yet, no matter how many times they were asked, their words did not change. They had seen the light. They had seen Travis lifted into the air. They had fled. And when they returned, he was gone. Polygraph tests were ordered, the needles tracing truth into ink. The results stunned even the investigators. The men passed, which left only two explanations. Either they had seen what they claimed, or they had woven the most elaborate, airtight lie imaginable. The town divided like water against stone. Some wanted to believe. Others insisted the men were killers hiding behind a fairy tale. But no one could explain why, if it was all a lie, Travis still had not returned. Back in that place beyond the forest, Travis clung to fragments of himself. He remembered the scent of pine resin, the sound of the chainsaw buzzing through the cold air, the laughter of his friends in the truck. He remembered the exact shade of the evening sky before the clearing opened, and the light swallowed everything. But those memories felt fragile, like photographs left too long in the sun. The more he reached for them, the more they faded. The beings pressed closer. Their black eyes reflected his face back to him, warped and pale in the dim glow. He wanted to scream at them, demand answers, demand release. But the hum grew louder, filling his head until his voice died in his throat, and then silence. The hum cut off as if severed with a blade. For the first time since waking, Travis heard something else, the sound of air moving, softly, rhythmically, like breath. The gray beings froze, their heads tilting in eerie synchronization. Then they turned not toward Travis, but toward the wall itself, as though listening to some command that came from everywhere and nowhere at once, without a word. They withdrew. Travis was left alone. The chamber shifted again, its surfaces rippling like liquid metal. A seam appeared in the wall, opening into a passage bathed in pale light. It beckoned like a door into a dream. Weak and trembling, Travis slid off the table, his bare feet pressing against the cold, seamless floor. His body felt heavier here, as if the air itself was thick. Each step was a battle against exhaustion, fear, and the disorienting sense that reality itself had bent sideways, yet he moved forward. Because to stay meant surrender, and Travis Walton was not ready to surrender. He stepped into the passage, the light folding around him, pulling him deeper into the unknown. Back on Earth, 5 days had passed. Search parties had scoured the woods. Helicopters had scanned the forest from above. Volunteers had combed the dirt roads and creeks. Nothing. No body. No footprints. No Travis. And yet, in a small hospital miles away, a phone was about to ring. A voice, weak, hoarse, desperate, was about to whisper the words no one expected to hear. I'm back. The corridor swallowed Travis in a wash of dim, pearly light. Every step he took sent soft ripples through the floor, as though he were walking on something alive, something that yielded but never broke. The air carried no scent, no warmth, no cold. It was simply there, thick and unmoving, like the air of a sealed tomb. He pressed his palm against the wall as he moved. It was smooth but not metallic, soft but not flesh. The material shifted subtly beneath his touch, adapting, as though acknowledging him. He jerked his hand back, heart pounding. The passage curved gently, endlessly, so that Travis could never see more than a few steps ahead. The geometry defied him. It was a place designed by something that had never known the comfort of corners, never thought in straight lines. "Where am I?" he whispered, the sound of his own voice startling him. No answer came. Only the echo of his words, bent strangely, like they'd been chewed and reshaped before returning to his ears. He walked until his legs shook beneath him. Then, suddenly, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling stretched impossibly high. Yet when Travis squinted, it seemed to vanish altogether, lost in the glow. The room was filled with structures, not machines in the way he understood them, but towering shapes that rose like crystalline spires. Their surfaces shimmered faintly, pulsing with hidden veins of light, and there were other figures, not the small gray beings he had fought earlier. These were taller, more graceful, their silhouettes human-like yet not entirely human. Their faces were obscured by luminous coverings that shimmered like glass masks, but their movements were fluid, deliberate, almost regal. Travis froze. One of the tall beings turned toward him. For a moment, their gazes locked, his, wide with fear. There's unreadable behind the shimmering mask. And yet, beneath the glow, Travis felt the weight of an intelligence pressing against him. It was not hostile. It was not kind. It simply was, vast and unshaken, like the gaze of the ocean on a single drop of rain. He stumbled backward. "Stay away from me." The being did not move closer. Instead, it raised an arm and gestured. The spires round the room responded instantly, humming low, vibrating with sound that Travis felt in his chest. The floor shifted beneath him. He gasped, grabbing for balance, and realized he was standing on something that was changing shape, lifting him, guiding him. The platform beneath his feet rose like an elevator, carrying him toward the center of the chamber. Panic surged. He wanted to scream, to leap off, but something deeper than fear held him still. A strange calm threaded with exhaustion, as if his will itself were being softened. The tall beings gathered below, watching in silence. And then Travis saw it. Suspended in the center of the chamber was a sphere, enormous, translucent, alive with shifting colors that bent and twisted like liquid fire. Within it, shadows swirled, shapes half-formed, dissolving before the mind could grasp them. Stars, memories, something older? The sphere pulsed, and Travis felt it inside him, a thrum that resonated with his very heartbeat. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest. Images flickered through his mind, endless forests lit by alien moons, oceans stretching across worlds he had never known, skies painted with colors no human eye should see. He felt small, impossibly small, like a child glimpsing the enormity of the universe for the first time. The beings seemed to wait, watching how he received the vision. Travis squeezed his eyes shut. "Stop, please stop." And just like that, the images vanished. The hum faded. The platform lowered, returning him to the floor. The tall being who had first noticed him stepped forward. Slowly, it extended a hand, a gesture startlingly human. Travis hesitated. His pulse hammered. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. And something in the gesture, in its stillness, tugged at the core of him, against every instinct screaming otherwise. He reached out. Their hands met. The touch was warm, firm, real. And in that moment, Travis understood something. The Greys he had fought before were not the masters here. They were workers, assistants, tools. The tall beings, these were the ones in control, and they had brought him here for a reason. Back on Earth, the story of Travis's disappearance had reached national news. Television anchors spoke his name with raised brows and skeptical smiles. Was it a crime disguised as a UFO tale? A hoax crafted for fame? Or something stranger still? His family, hollow-eyed from sleepless nights, clung to hope, but even their faith frayed as the days stretched on. 5 days was too long. Too impossible. Surely, if Travis were alive, he would have found his way back by now. But the truth was, Travis was not lost in the woods. He was standing inside a room without corners, holding the hand of something not human, staring into a sphere that pulsed with the heartbeat of another world. The hand that Travis held was steady, almost grounding. Its warmth shocked him. He had expected something cold, alien, unfeeling. Instead, the touch carried a strange familiarity, as if the being wanted him to know he wasn't prey. At least, not in the way he feared. But the stillness couldn't last. The tall being released his hand and gestured again. The spires within the chamber shifted, their veins of light brightening, sending pulses that echoed like heartbeats through the floor. Travis flinched at each thrum. His body, though weak, responded with a strange synchronization, his pulse quickening to match the rhythm. And then, the sphere hanging in the chamber dissolved into cascading streams of light that fell like curtains all around him. The visions returned. Time unraveled. Travis found himself standing not on the smooth alien floor, but in the middle of the forest again. The pines stretched tall overhead, their needles whispering in a night breeze. The crew's laughter echoed faintly, as though carried from another world. He looked down at his hand, solid, real. But then the forest flickered, peeled away, and he was underwater, gazing up through blue-green depths at a fractured light above. Strange shapes swam beyond the veil of the sea, silhouettes vast and unearthly, moving with slow grace. Another flicker, and he was in a desert beneath twin suns. Another flicker, and he was on a plain of ice beneath skies painted violet and crimson. Each scene lasted no more than a breath, yet carried the weight of lifetimes. Travis cried out, stumbling backward. "Stop, I can't!" The lights dimmed. The visions broke apart, returning him to the chamber, gasping. His body slick with sweat, though the air was cool. The tall beings did not approach. They only watched. Their silence pressed heavier than words ever could. It was not cruelty, it was a test. Back on Earth, those missing hours, the days without Travis, pressed on his friends like a curse. The search had gone from frantic to hopeless. Bloodhounds had been brought in, their noses pressed to the jackets and shirts that still carried Travis's scent. They sniffed, whined, and circled the clearing, but each time they pulled away, confused, unable to find a trail. Reporters swarmed the sheriff's office, their voices sharp, their questions accusing. Did the men kill him? Are they hiding something? The crew, exhausted, gone from sleepless nights, repeated their story until their throats were raw. Always the same words: a craft, a light, Travis taken. Polygraphs were given again. The needles did not waver, but the town remained divided. Some whispered murder, others whispered madness, and a few whispered the word nobody wanted to say aloud: aliens. And still, there was no Travis. In that chamber without corners, Travis was given no food, no water, no rest. And yet, somehow, he did not wither. Time bent strangely, and he could not tell if he'd been there for hours or years. He tried speaking to the beings, demanding answers, pleading for release. But the words fell flat in the humming air, ignored, until one of the tall beings stepped forward again. This time, there was no gesture, no visions. Instead, it touched something at the base of its shimmering mask. The glassy surface flickered, dissolved, and for the first time, Travis saw what lay beneath. The face was startlingly human. Not perfectly so, its features were too symmetrical, its skin too smooth, its eyes too luminous, but human enough that Travis staggered, his voice breaking. What are you?" The being's lips moved, and though no sound came through the air, Travis heard it inside his mind. Traveler. The single word struck like a bell, vibrating through his skull. His eyes filled with tears. He didn't understand. "Why me?" he whispered. The being tilted its head, as though searching for the right shape of thought. "Because you looked at the light and did not turn away." Travis felt his legs weaken. He remembered at the moment in the clearing, the fear, the pull. The reckless step forward while the others stayed behind. That single choice had brought him here. The being's mask shimmered back into place. Then, with a grace that seemed final, it gestured once more. The walls around Travis began to shift. The chamber folded into itself, collapsing into a tunnel of light. He felt the floor vanish beneath him, his body lifted into nothing. He screamed dry, helpless until the sound was stolen from his throat. And then there was silence back in Arizona. The sheriff had begun to speak the words no one wanted to hear, that Travis Walton was dead. It had been nearly 5 days. Too long, too impossible. But just as despair threatened to root itself in every heart that searched for him, a phone would soon ring at a small gas station miles away, and a voice, weak, trembling, broken, would speak. "Help me, please. This is Travis." The phone rang just after midnight in a small service station off the highway. The attendant, half asleep with a magazine spread across his counter, answered without thought. On the other end, a voice rasped, weak, trembling, as though dragged up from the bottom of a well. "This is Travis." A pause, followed by a sob. "Help me, please." The words chilled the attendant. Travis Walton had been missing for 5 days. The story had made headlines, dividing families and neighbors alike. Some called it murder, others a hoax. And now here was the voice of the missing man, breaking through the static of the line like a ghost trying to claw its way back into the world. Within an hour, Travis's family and crew were on their way. When they found him, he was curled on the cold ground behind the station, his body trembling violently. His clothes hung loose, his face gaunt, his eyes wild with a fear no one could name. He clung to his brother's arms, whispering fragments of words, light figures. A room without corners. His voice cracked, as if speaking the memories aloud threatened to unmake him all over again. At the hospital, doctors swarmed him. His vitals were unstable. He was dehydrated, malnourished, and bruised across his chest, the very place where the beam of light had struck him. They expected confusion, disorientation. They did not expect the way he flinched from electric lamps, the way he screamed when a nurse's silver tray caught the light. The doctors called it trauma. Shock, hallucination, perhaps. But Travis knew what he had seen in his fractured memories. He was still on the vessel. The last moment he remembered was the tall being's mask dissolving, the word traveler echoing in his skull, and then the collapse of the chamber into searing light. After that, he recalled falling through silence, through darkness, until the cold bite of pine needles pressed against his cheek. He was on the edge of a highway, the night air sharp with the scent of diesel and dirt. When he opened his eyes, he saw the craft one last time, hovering, waiting. Its surface glowed like molten copper, pulsing softly. Then, with a shimmer that bent the air, it shot upward, gone in an instant, leaving only the sound of his ragged breath. The looking glass was closed, but on Earth, the ordeal had only begun. When Travis returned, the story exploded. Reporters swarmed the hospital. UFO investigators descended on the town. Skeptics sharpened their knives. Sheriff Gillespie, who had once suspected the crew of murder, now faced a new puzzle. How had a man vanished for 5 days, only to reappear in the same torn clothes, dehydrated and battered, yet very much alive? Travis tried to explain, but every word felt too small. How could he describe the weight of that hum, the endless corridors, the sphere alive with visions of worlds no human eye had seen? How could he make anyone understand that time itself had melted around him, that he had not been in a dream, but in a place more real than waking? When he spoke of the small gray figures, people shuddered. When he spoke of the tall beings who seemed almost human, people leaned closer. And when he whispered the word traveler, people frowned, unsure if it was revelation or delirium. Polygraph tests were administered. Travis passed. Hypnosis was attempted. His story deepened, grew more vivid, but never changed. And yet, the world was not kind. Some called him a liar, chasing fame. Others whispered that he had lost his mind in the woods. Only a few looked at him with quiet wonder, as though they, too, had glimpsed the possibility that humanity was not alone. For Travis, the hardest part was not the accusations. It was the mirror. Each time he caught his reflection, he saw a man who had stepped into the light and come back changed. He saw the hollowness in his own eyes, the tremor in his hands, the deep knowledge that he was marked, now seared into the fabric of a story too large for him. At night, he dreamed of the sphere, of visions too immense for words. He woke gasping, unsure if he was still on Earth or if he had been placed in another layer of the looking glass. Sometimes, in the stillness, he swore he heard the hum again. Soft, distant, waiting. The world might argue forever about what happened to Travis Walton, but he knew the truth of it. He had been taken. He had been shown. And then he had been returned, like a stone tossed back from the river of the unknown. The years after Travis Walton's return were not gentle. Fame pressed down like a second abduction. Interviews, books, investigators, skeptics, all demanding, all circling, all pulling at the story as though it were theirs to possess. But in the quiet hours, when the cameras were gone and the voices had faded, Travis was left alone with the silence. And it was in that silence that the truth seeped back into him, piece by piece. One autumn evening, he sat beneath the pines outside his home. The air was sharp, filled with the scent of sap and cooling earth. Above him, the sky stretched wide, spattered with stars. The same stars he had seen from that sphere, the ones that had burned into him. Like fire through glass dot for a long time, he simply watched. And then, unbidden, a memory rose, the tall being's face, dissolving into light. The word traveler whispered into his mind. He understood it differently now. Not as a title, but as an invitation. Traveler, they had called him, not because he had gone with them willingly, but because he had crossed. He had been taken beyond the border of human understanding, glimpsed the vastness, and returned. The journey was no longer theirs. It was his. Travis spoke rarely about the deepest parts of what he remembered. But one night, under hypnosis, he revealed something that startled even himself. The looking glass had not only shown him distant worlds, it had shown him Earth, our world, burning, healing, rebuilding, changing. He had seen rivers dry to dust, then return as shining veins of silver. He had seen humanity reaching upward, fragile but unbroken, building vessels of their own that pierced the veil of the stars. He had seen faces, human faces, standing beside the tall beings in a chamber of light. Their eyes filled not with fear, but with recognition. It was as though the sphere had whispered, "This is where you are. This is where you may go. This is what you must choose." But choices come with weight. For years, Travis wrestled with doubt. Were those visions true futures or possibilities? Were they warnings or promises? Was he meant to share them or keep them locked away? Like seeds that must wait for the right season to sprout, the world wanted certainty. He could only offer fragments, and yet, in the sharing of those fragments, something curious happened. People listened. Not everyone believed, but many wondered. Some were comforted. Some felt less alone. And in that wondering, in that opening of thought, Travis felt the faintest echo of the sphere's hum, the sound of possibilities stirring in human hearts. One night, decades after the abduction, Travis returned to the woods near Snowflake, Arizona. The pines loomed tall, just as they had. The clearing where the light had struck him was still there, though softened by time. He stood in the silence, listening. At first, there was nothing but the whisper of wind through needles. But then, faintly, almost imperceptibly, he felt it, the low vibration, the subtle resonance, the pulse of a presence not quite gone. He looked up. The stars shimmered, indifferent yet alive, and in their vast geometry, he felt the truth settle into him like a final gift. We are not alone. We have never been alone. And one day, we too will step fully into the light. The looking glass had closed, yes, but the memory of it remained inside him, inside all who dared to listen. Travis Walton was no prophet, no chosen one. He was simply a man who had walked between two skies and returned with a story that said, the universe is not cold and empty. It is alive, it is watching, and perhaps it is waiting for us. And so, when he lay awake at night, the hum still faint in his bones. Travis no longer feared it. Instead, he closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and drifted into sleep, knowing that dreams themselves are another kind of journey, another crossing, another looking glass, and somewhere, out there, among the silent stars, the travelers were watching still.